shadows hide you? I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you! Never lose hope.
Here for a chat.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, friend!
Hello and welcome to episode 308 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, September 9th in the evening. Joining from Gadgetzan, New York, it's me, Ridiculous Hat. From Karazhan, California, we got Bodikus.
What up?
Yo. From Nomergon, Ohio, we have Edelweiss.
Hello.
And from the Twisting Nether, where you are listeners, we have you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much, everyone that's left us reviews. Really helps other people find the show. No new patrons this week, but those of you that are current patrons, I really like what you did with your hair this week. I think it's working for you. And also, thank you so much for your support. Life and Ladder. Bodikus. Battlecus. Let's talk Battlegrounds a little bit. How you been doing?
I went hard this weekend. I played a lot. I think one of my sessions was probably close to 12 hours of just straight Battlegrounds.
My goodness. I
didn't make a lot of progress during that 12 hours, but I'm hovering right around the mid 6Ks, like 64, 6500. It was a lot of fun trying to figure everything out, and I'm not very good at it. I'm still like there's just like so many things that you can miss. There's so many like small little edges to be gained, and like my brain doesn't process things as fast as it used to because the format's new, and also I haven't been playing Battlegrounds straight for the last however long it's been out. But I'm doing okay with it. A couple builds I really enjoy. I really love APM Pirates is probably my favorite one to get. Or Millhouse Elementals is also a lot of fun.
Oh, with the refreshing guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially I don't know why, but I think I like those more because I just close out the game when the rope is at the end, and then reopen it, and then I just figure out whether I've won or lost, and I don't get tilted by losing like a couple 50-50s. Like I got really tilted when I lost. I was playing against, God, I want to say it was like some mechs, and I lost 4 50-50s in a row in a game where I was clearly losing, that I teched against him perfectly. And I lost 4 50-50s in a row to lose one round, and then they caught up the next round, and I ended up losing first place from there, which was kind of tilting. But other than that, like, it's been a lot of fun. Killing a lot of people playing beasts, because a lot of people are playing beasts, and we'll talk about that more in the news section. But I think everything pretty much has a really good late game comp. I've won with pretty much every late game comp, and I'm rarely in beasts, but it's possible I should be dipping my toe into it more. But I kind of have a strategy I have in mind on how you should go about doing that, which is don't take leapfroggers early, because leapfroggers early are not very good.
I feel extremely confident that our bonus episode this month will be a Battlegrounds bonus. Really confident about that. Because, yeah, I've been playing a lot of it too. But, yeah, it's a weird and different and interesting format that there are definitely things that we're still figuring out. It's so much more complicated than vanilla BGs was. Like, the last dog video I watched is he had mechs with Divine Shield, except his last unit was the Quillbore, that when you pop a Divine Shield, you get the Blood Gem. He had a golden one of those. His hand overflowed every turn with Blood Gems, and then he had a Ground Shaker. So, like, Ground Shaker, Divine Shield, Quillbore mechs was not what I expected, but it was very effective.
Well, I think that's honestly one of my favorite things about this patch is that it feels like there's a lot of tribal synergies between the tribes, whereas before a lot of the times it felt like you would go really hard. You would just like find your niche and go really hard into that, and you could still kind of do that, especially with like elementals is very self synergy based. But Quillboars, I feel like interact really well with all of the other tribes. Like they interact really well with pirates. They interact really well with dragons. If you have Whelp Smuggler, that's a pretty broken when you're getting blood gems with a Whelp Smuggler. And also they're solid with, obviously, like you said, Mechs has some synergies with them. I don't see a whole lot of like heavy Quillboar comps anymore. They seem more of like a support minion type that just interacts well with all the others.
They don't really scale enough to keep up with the best stuff, and also, I mean, they're the most recent tribe, and they got nerfed a bunch and changed the least, I think. So it's not bad, but yeah, you usually find yourself, you can still kind of go Agam Flatsus, but Menagerie kind of sucks right now. And otherwise, like a Ground Shaker here or a Gem Splitter there, maybe, but you're not going to see full Quillboars anymore. It doesn't really solve any of the problems that the format has.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad. The Menagerie's in the spot that it is. I've had a couple Menagerie comps, but mostly those are where I end up in a situation where I'm struggling to find any direction to go or anything to really latch onto, and those are the games where you just kind of struggle to get like 5th or 6th and hope not to get 7th or 8th, which is going to happen sometimes, but
yeah. Well, I'm glad you've been enjoying it.
And it just feels like there's a lot to do. Like there's a lot of every comp kind of has a counter to it. It feels like you're able to tech against some of the best comps if you really need to, which I like a lot. And it's a Zap meta. I mean, if people are playing beasts, yeah, or there's the I had somebody play the 1/3 that deals 1 damage to everything.
Unstable Ghoul.
I never remember. Yeah, an Unstable Ghoul against me, but they had their Nadina first. Ooh. And their Nadina attacked first, and then I attacked.
Yeah.
I don't really know what their plan. I don't really know what their plan was, because I had obviously some Divine Shield minions. Like I think I had 2, but yeah, it didn't work out super well for them. And then when I have less time, I'm playing a good amount of duels, and duels is frustrating because I really just wanted to play it to try to get the. I think it's like all troops something. Whichever the first treasure is that reduces your battlecry minions by cost of 1. It felt like
all together now.
All together now, yeah. It was like I think I did like 20 or 25 duels runs before I finally got that once, and then I instantly got like a 10-win run when I got it because it's really good. But I just needed to complain to Enthralamond in DMs about not getting it, and I got it in my next run.
That's how that works. That's true.
Yep.
Edelweiss, how you been doing? How's your life in ladder?
Well, I've been kind of doing this balance where if I'm streaming, I'm definitely playing standards. So when I'm not streaming, I'm much more likely to be doing other modes in terms of battlegrounds, in terms of trying to catch up on the solo content. I had hoped to get all the way through Tamsin before today, but that did not happen. I was pretty far behind.
I have heard Book of Heroes Tamsin, or Book of Mercs Tamsin, is really, really great. Like, almost universal glowing reviews from people, and I've also heard it's got some pretty crazy story twists. I'm going to be exploring that this week for sure.
Yeah. In terms of BGs, though, Gem Splitter, like you mentioned, that's probably my favorite unit in BGs. And mechs have been my favorite tribe, even if they're not necessarily the best. I feel like you can actually get people in the mid game though, just because Holy Mackerel is really good, and if it survives, it does a lot of damage. So, been experimenting with sort of different ways of doing mechs, because there's the mechs you can do where you have microbots, and then the mechs you can do where you specifically don't have microbots and have, Baron and to the 5-star that resurrects your first 2 mechs that died.
Kangors, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not
I
sure.
mean, Baron
which
and the
ones I
Sex
like,
Dropper
but
is so good together.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't been able to pull that off yet.
Oh,
but
it's
that seems
really
great.
I mean, mechs actually feel like they have a really solid late game strategy that obviously doesn't scale super well into the late game, but you can kill people pretty well with it. And also it has a really good matchup against Murlocs, which is actually pretty popular, unless Murlocs get like a golden brand. Because Murlocs can outscale it, but generally your Divine Shields are going to work pretty well against Murlocs.
Trying to think of what have I found myself really enjoying when I'm playing BGs, besides the obviously broken stuff. Like, there have been a couple times I've gotten Caligos Dragons going with a Golden Whelp Smuggler, and that's obviously ridiculous. I don't know. Pirates are fun. Peggy is so much fun. Just like...
Peggy is a lot of fun.
And the other dog video that I really enjoyed watching was when he first got Flat Tusk Peggy APM Pirates. I do not know how it is possible to keep up with the amount of game actions that are happening, because it's like you have to weave in blood gems to APM Pirates, and I barely have time to do APM Pirate turns to begin with. Very enjoyable to watch, very stressful as well.
Have you played New Galakron yet?
No. Well, I played him when I get the hero power off Master Win.
Right. I got a 8 gold nosy. I think it was 8 or 9 gold nosy looter. And the first golden off the nosy looter got me the 5-drop pirate that makes
Hogger.
another pirate golden.
Oh, Tony.
Yeah, Tony. And then the next golden when that one's golden, you get a golden every turn. And that golden gave me a golden Murazond with a brand in the shop.
Oh,
so you won that game.
So I had a golden Caligos and 2 regular Caligos, like, very, very quickly.
Seems effective.
Yeah, it was very good.
Well, I wish you were recording that for Trollden. That would be nice. But yeah, I've been enjoying BGs too. I've been playing just a lot of Hearthstone. I entered Legend earlier this week at 99, just inside top 100, with the Vicious Syndicate Stealth Quest Rogue, which is still just fine, and you still get to play cheap Biospine Slayers, and Spy Mistress to activate Greyheart Sage is very enjoyable. You just play minions and hit your opponent, and you get to play Wicked stats, but it's not as linear as it seems. This curve is a lot lower, and there are ways to make the games more interesting. It's a good deck, strong. But lately I've been playing Giant Rod Handlock. It's plays, Flesh Giants and Ruined Mithril Rod. So, Giant Rod. So it's been really, really good.
Giant fleshy rods.
Yeah, correct. Right.
Okay,
yeah,
we can stop.
I don't understand. What will we stop? So anyways, so I cratered well out of top 100 by playing a bunch of other stuff and couldn't really buy a win, and then I found Rod Handlock, and that deck is filthy, and so I am just outside of top 200 now, kind of right in that border, but I think the meta has adapted a little bit. The first 2 games I played today were Poison Rogues, and let me tell you, that's not a great matchup for the Handlock deck. Not really what you want to see. I died on turn 6 2 games in a row. So, I've also played a bunch of mirrors where the Warlocks had Vipers, and there was one game where they Vipered my Rod on 3, and then I beat them anyways, so, I don't know how good that is in the mirror, but it is very good against Poison Rogues and Doomhammer Quest Shamans and all the other weapon decks, so, yeah. Anyways, I've enjoyed BGs, I'm at 55-ish, I've enjoyed Standard, having fun with Hearthstone right now, but I envision there will be a nerf in the near future, which we should expect next week, I think. Probably next week. Alex said they're deciding tomorrow, but they have a planned window for a balance patch. That means that we can either expect the patch next week, probably Thursday on the 16th, or the following week on Tuesday the 21st. Nothing confirmed, but I would guess the mini set is probably first week of October, so we're rapidly approaching the window where they're going to change some stuff. Yeah, it's the cadence. There's a lot
It's
to
hard
keep
to
up
keep
with.
up now.
Yeah. Every 2 weeks, they seem to be changing something. So I would guess that next week we are once again due for a change. We'll see. But I understand some level of fatigue with this format just because the amount of from-hand shenanigans is pretty crazy. At the same time, I have had an increasingly varied ladder experience. And so, like, the polarity in opinions remains strong. You can't really say that you really like or really dislike the standard without pissing somebody off right now. But I will say that I am playing a lot of it and enjoying it, but also I am glad that BG is as fun as it is, even though also I think that calling BGs objectively balanced right now might be a stretch, but it's fun. I'm having fun with it.
This standard really throws me off because in a lot of ways I expected it to be a similar experience to Scholomance, where I was really going in and just loving all the different things you could try. But I think a combination of the quest lines making it feel challenging to explore other strategies because they have such concrete win conditions that will get you within a pretty quick amount of time. And also just I got really like pulled into work stuff for a while, and I think that like took me out of the zone just long enough that then when I had more time again and was going back in, I sort of I wasn't in that groove of just trying all kinds of weird deck building stuff and was much more willing to go for the decks at hand and do less experimentation. I don't know. It's been kind of weird for me. And I find myself also drawn to the other game modes like Battlegrounds, which is, really new and fun right now.
Yeah. I think that I would... It's not the quest lines specifically, like, as a fundamental mechanic. It is the tuning of some of the decks that play the quest lines right now. Like, I want to clarify that point a little bit. I don't think the mechanic is inherently flawed, but I think that what Mage, Shaman, and Warlock do to the format right now is powerful enough that you are unlikely to beat that with an off-meta strategy. And trying something new means you're going to die to Fireballs or Flush Giants or Perpetual Flame. It's pretty hard to dodge those three things with any one deck, and that's kind of the trifecta that's warping the meta a little bit right now. That going off meta, like there are plenty of meta decks that you can play to target specific things, but also there are plenty of ways that you can try something different and then just lose and then feel like, why did I bother? I played against a Rush Warrior today, and they had a good opening. Ganargon won. They had Bumper Car on 2, I think. They Harbor Scamp on 2. Curved out. They had a Sword Reader on 4. I Soul Rended, whatever. They played a bunch more stuff on 5. They had a Playmaker turn. And then I went Trigger Rod, 0 mana Tour Guide, tap, Flesh Giant, Bristleback, Baron, Scavenger, Drain Soul, go. And they conceded. How do you beat that? You beat that.
That has honestly been my experience playing Rush Warrior. I went back to it because I remembered us talking about how, still a good deck, putting up decent numbers. I don't know if that has remained true, but you can have consistent good boards and die to the swing turns right now. Like, the swing turns are unbelievable. Handlock does it better than most because it also involves healing. But Mage can have crazy swing turns. The Shamans can have crazy swing turns, particularly if they time it with their getting to not be overloaded. Or even just the second stage of the quest. They clear all your stuff with a Perpetual Flame, make some Feral Spirits, and then also get that 3/3 taunt. it feels like, wow, I just, I lost my whole board, and they made an entire board to, hold things off while they're overloaded. It can be really rough sometimes, and it is like okay to include certain tech cards against some of the decks. I actually did throw in the 4-post to Rush Warrior, and that helps a bit with certain matchups. I think Garrote Rogue in particular. But it just felt like, yeah, we're not in the Barons meta anymore. Like, Rush Warrior doesn't quite cut it. I was amused that I did beat a mage that went double flow because, well, it's 3 mana now, so they went flow on 3, flow on 4. I managed to get enough damage in so that when they finally played their quest reward with an ice barrier up, I just did ETC things to kill them. But it's, I think, not really a meta that's conducive to experimentation the way that it really felt like Scholomance was. So even though there's a lot of cool, exciting things that I like about the cards in this set, it has not kept its charm the way that Scholomance did for me. And I watched the Kibler video talking about the cards, and I think I am more comfortable with this meta than he is, but I also share a lot of his thoughts on it.
I mean, he's really not happy right now. Like, there's a lot of what this meta does is very anti-Kibler, and it's a huge, huge change from Barons. I mean, we've kind of covered this every week, that if you like optimizing, then this is a great meta, and if you like experimenting, this is a bad one. And if you like longer games, then there's nothing for you to do right now, and if you like shorter ones, then this is perfect. And those opinions are so diametrically opposed from each other in terms of preference that it's almost difficult to have a conversation around what's happening, because people are they're either, am I the only one that likes this meta, or am I the only one that doesn't? Plot twist, you're neither. Plenty of people have quite a wide range of opinions, but I imagine that the patch next week will look to rein in a lot of the From Handy stuff, and also probably buff Warrior. Assuming the patch is next week, could be the week after, the 21st. But they have to lay the groundwork for the mini set to be both impactful and not super break standard, and they also have to kind of fix Wild. So there will be plenty of things that they are going to work on, and I think that I like the current meta, but I can see a future where I don't if it stays the same, because the potential to burn out on it is really, really high, more so than I think most other metas have experienced in the past.
Kind of funny to me, because I feel like Standard is honestly not all that much different than Duels right now, except that Duels is supposed to be broken, and Standard just feels really broken. Like, the stuff that you're doing in Standard feels a little too bonkers, and I don't know. Like, if this was a 6-set meta, then sure, right? Because that's when it's supposed to be ultimate crazy, but we still have a set to go and a mini set, and yeah, this format feels like it's all gas, no brakes right now, and I don't even know what's going to happen during the 6-set meta. Like, I can't even imagine how that's going to feel.
Yeah, where do we go from here? Like, what is the next thing? Yeah. What could they possibly do? And it's going to have to be, that's why I imagine the next nerf patch that we get, I would imagine they're going to aim for it to be somewhat extensive, and if they don't, then that means they're going to have to target some pretty heavy-handed nerfs towards the end of this expansion cycle, because I don't really know where you can go next without things getting really, really crazy. And turn 7 in a game this week, I played 37 power, and turn 7. I'm going to say it, that's too much. Too much for one turn.
Yeah, it feels like it's a potential bad situation either way, if they don't make some serious changes, because either the 6th set is going to make things even more broken, which is most likely because they want to print interesting cards that people want to own and put into their decks and have it be a cool set, or they make another Rasticon's Rumble and nobody really cares about the cards, and the format doesn't change, it just stays the same with very few additions, and that's also not a good place to be. So I have faith that things will change and get better. But I don't know if it'll get better enough. Is my worry.
Well, and again, better is a complex word here, because I also don't think the current meta is bad, just extremely powerful.
Yeah, also that.
Yeah, there are some people that really like this meta, as you mentioned, Hat. And even in Wild, when I was trying to explain, like, hey, it's all a matter of perspective, I'll bet there are some people that feel silenced because they're really enjoying this Wild and don't want to get, crapped on for it. And someone said, yeah, actually, I have really been enjoying this Wild. And, I think people should be free to say that, because there's never going to be a meta that everyone thinks is great for the most part, because there's always going to be some people that either are into it or not into it, and because the majority is going one way, or people are being really loud, they're going to be like, well, I don't really want to speak up because it sounds like people are not going to be on my side here.
Yeah, the discourse around the game has been rather challenging in the past little while, but I imagine that there is opportunity for them to make some... You can make small but large changes here, right? Like, this is a matter of tuning. I think if you say, what can we do to save the format? If you look at current standard Warlock, if you move Rod to 4, Backfire to 4, Soul Rend to 5, deck's not dead, but it's pretty close. And that's with only 3 total mana added to 1 mana added to 3 different cards, 6 different copies. You make some pretty significant, substantial changes to the deck and make it a lot easier to get under. All of the current concerns that I think some folks have with the format, you don't have to deal with giant reworks. You move small numbers in enough places, and you make a really, really big difference into how decks play out, but you keep the core of them alive. And you wouldn't even have to make all 3 of those nerfs, I don't think, but if you wanted Warlock to be way, way worse, it would be easy enough to do with just hitting support cards. You don't have to hit Demon Seed. In Wild, I don't know what they can do. I'm going to ask Wild experts on that. There are options, but, it's a lot there.
One thing that I think makes it really challenging is if you are specifically trying to get some kind of control to exist, I'm not sure how well that works with even changes as dramatic as that, because the Warlock deck would still be really good against any kind of control. Same with the Mage, Quest Mage. We just have a lot of control killers right now. And I understand not wanting, Control Priest from before, where you're just running them out of resources. I think Control should have win conditions. But I was kind of bummed that we didn't have, say, a Quest Warlock that their goal was to just kill everything and then they kill you with fatigue, because not that they're comboing through their deck, but just they're heavy control, and so they just try and kill everything, and the quest is a win condition. And I don't know, it feels weird to me not having control.
So,
all right, I have the solution.
Okay.
Are you two ready for the solution?
Yes.
All right, so we limit the amount of damage you can take in a turn to 15 until one of the players in the lobby dies.
Okay. That would make games longer.
You don't die from hand so quickly.
Yeah, that's true. If it works for Battlegrounds.
Solution.
Yeah. I would be curious to see what a damage cap per turn would look like. That would be interesting and weird. But so, the word control, I think, is a loaded term because people have different definitions of what a control deck is. But I will say that, long games are dead. If you want long games to happen again, that is the question. And I think the purpose of this expansion was to speed up the format, and they did that. And then the way to slow it down again, you have to make a lot of things, just tune the format down. You have to make Perpetual Flame worse. You have to make, the Brukan endgame scenarios, I think, are control-esque but not slow. You could add numbers to the quest progression lines, whatever. There are ways to make the decks that win from hand that deny attrition strategies from existing worse. But this is not a format where they wanted attrition strategies to exist. Mission accomplished. And so how do we slow games down? I mean, you can make the decks worse, but you'd have to pretty fundamentally change a lot of the win conditions. I think that they're probably experimenting with an environment where they don't have as much of the attrition-based control, and then seeing how it goes. It's possible that maybe at the end of this expansion or the end of next expansion before the next rotation that we see the mass nerf that Ixar was talking about, and they really bring a lot of the power down here and allow a Baron's Priest sort of thing to exist again. It's kind of hard to say, because right now the format is all about getting to do a thing as opposed to waiting to stop the opponent from doing their thing.
And to be clear, I don't need Baron's Priest back in my life. I just would be okay with reaching turn 10 a little more often, with feeling like you can play something like Alex in your deck and it's not incredibly optimistic, or Nazoth. I think right now you're often not including those because the game is unlikely to last that long.
Yeah. Slowing the format down by 2 turns and allowing control to exist are different things, because control is a complicated word. But yes, long games are dead. Making them not dead, I think, is a good goal. I think that'd be cool. All right. We should talk about the news, I guess. Oh, go ahead, Edel.
Oh, it's just also going to add that a different balance challenge, I suppose, is that certain quests that are borderline run the risk of really exploding with even a mini set, depending on what cards are included in that. For example, the Quest Hunter, if you have one more card that is efficient and does damage, that could get pretty crazy pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah. There are a lot of things that seem like they're going to get support. And I think Quest Hunter is bizarrely close. Like, it's actually really close to being there. But it's not quite there yet. All right, let's talk news. Let's go to the news. Let's do that.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right. So, first of all, there were a bunch of hotfixes that went out. A lot of them specific to Battlegrounds, but kind of a little bit everywhere here and there. And I was hoping that this first one was fake, but apparently it turns out to have been a real bug, in that there were some BG characters that were getting a higher portion of the higher rated MMR players were getting specific heroes more often. So there was a bug with getting specific Battlegrounds heroes more often than you should if you were the higher rated person in the lobby. And that has since been fixed, which is good, because the current best hero, or one of the best heroes, if not the best hero in the game, was one of the new heroes, and if the higher MMR player is more likely to get that hero in every Battleground, they're also more likely to continue to increase their MMR. So thankfully, this has been fixed. The chat settings not being saved is still a known issue. I don't believe this has been fixed yet.
It's going to need a client patch.
There is a bug with Maxima plus Cthulhu.
That got fixed.
That I think we talked about last week a little bit.
Yep.
That,
if you played a single Cthulhu buff and then either recruited Cthulhu from deck or resurrected it, then it was a 128/128. So people were playing it with Maxima Blastenheimer, which would yank the 128 Cthulhu out of your deck and hit people in the face for 128, which was unintended. So that has since been resolved. My understanding is that Ixar himself was testing this bug briefly over the course of the past week. He was
caught in 4K.
I mean, caught implies that it is something that you have to worry about. If that's how the game works, that's how the game works. I know there's a lot of debate around the morality of playing a bug on ladder, but like, it was a game. Like, it was a single ladder game in Wild Ladder. Like, I don't think that it's a huge deal, and then they fixed it. So If any of you have gotten hit by an 8/8 Cthulhu today and then your opponent conceded, that is what happened. The bug was fixed, and they didn't know it. I have had plenty of reports of that happening so far. People are like, yeah, I got hit by an 8/8 Cthulhu and then my opponent left. I don't know what happened. They fixed it. So, there are rumors that it's still broken with resurrect effects, unconfirmed. I can't confirm or deny, but they at least fixed the one where it kills you right away, and all the other builds were way worse, and the Maxima build was not particularly good to begin with, so that has been resolved.
Yep. Also, there was, looks like a issue between Cthulhu and Whelp Smuggler, which is pretty powerful, in case you're wondering.
They partially fixed that, but
they partially fixed it, but their description is like, there's a small chance it won't give a buff if multiple end of turn buffs from a different source trigger at the same time, but it's no longer going to give extra buffs at least. So yep. And then those are kind of the major ones. I think we wanted to talk a little bit about Leapfrogger here, because Leapfrogger is kind of the big talk of Battlegrounds right now. Just in that, obviously, for those of you who are not big Battlegrounds players, Leapfrogger is a 2-star minion. It is a 3/3 with Death Rattle. Give another friendly beast +2/+2 and this Death Rattle. And largely what people have been doing is pairing this with effects like Baron Rivendare and Macaw, which triggers your Death Rattle multiple times and stacks it on a unit, and then triggers it multiple more times and multiple more. And if the Macaw survives, and it is your last minion and is constantly attacking and triggering itself with the Death Rattle, you get pretty nutty amounts of stats. Insurmountable amount of stats, most people would say.
And the Macaw, the Macaw, when it buffs itself, it just doubles. So, like, there are plenty of pictures of...
the golden version, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, no, it's even if it's just a regular version after it has a big pile of leapfroggers on it, then it leaps onto itself but keeps the leapfrogs. So it just ends up basically doubling.
Oh, yeah. Every turn it doubles.
Yep. So you end up with these screenshots of RDU had a clip in the latest Trollden with a 3 million attack Macaw beating him. 3 million! That's a lot! Too much, I'll say. Too much.
Did you hear about the Holy Meckerol Vol'jin player that got 2 Holy Meckerols and gave one of them 0 attack so that they had infinite divine shields? Because one of them wouldn't attack, and so one would just attack and the other one would get attacked and have divine shield.
Oh. And so then it would skip the attack
against a leapfrogger. They did it against a leapfrogger player, and I guess what happened was the turn went for a really long time, obviously, and then it ended in a tie. But then it skipped their next 2 combats, where the person who won the lobby had a zap and killed both of them.
Wow.
Wait. I think I need some explaining here. So hang on. So one of them has...
So you have 2
0
Meckerals.
attack. Did it have
one has taunt and 0 attack, and the other one has attack. So you attack with the...
Vol'jin, so he switched it with like an egg.
Right. I get
Mechano
how that was done. I was just a little confused
on
what
Bubble Meckerel attacks.
Yeah.
Then 0/8 Bubbled Meckerel gets attacked. Loses the bubble, skips its own attack because it has 0 attack, goes back to newly bubbled Meckerel. It's an infinite.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
So you can get down to that specific sequence.
Huh.
Yeah. So this is Unstoppable Rock versus Immovable Posts in action. And what actually happens is it skips your shops and then you get farmed by Zap. That's what happens.
Oh, that's so brutal.
It's that's something. I don't know.
So yeah, that's kind of the major talk, is that obviously Leapfrogger is a 2-star minion, which is really easily acquired. and it's giving a stats that is insurmountable by any composition, which is true. And people are not super happy about it. You also, largely, what most people do is combine this with a rat pack, and what will happen is if the rat pack has a bunch of these buffs, then when the rat pack dies, all of the 1/1s also pop out and then get the leapfrogger buffs, and it's mostly just like an insurmountable amount of health and attack. And so people are getting tired of seeing this because it's become very popular for people to kind of force this composition, with leapfrogger being a 2-star minion, which means it's easily accessible, etc., etc. My thoughts after playing quite a bit in the mid 6Ks is that I have definitely seen an uptick in people forcing beasts. I've also killed a lot of people who are forcing these beasts because, in my opinion, it is not necessarily the correct strategy to try to force. I think that Leapfrogger is too good as a 2-star minion for sure. But if I look at the late game of beasts without Leapfrogger, I don't know how they compete with the other end game scaling of, for instance, elementals or pirates or especially dragons. Mostly dragons. Dragons has probably the best scaling or easily accessible scaling in the game right now. And also, generally, if the Leapfrogger composition does not have a Baron, you die, and therefore there's a minion on 6-star called Zap, and that will largely kill Barons and can end up winning you games, which means that there's tech against it. And so I don't know that necessarily Leapfrogger needs to be removed or changed, but I think it would take a much longer time of me playing the format to really understand if that is a true statement or not. But I'm interested your 2 thoughts on the whole Leapfrogger situation, because I know it's a kind of a big hot button topic in the Battleground scene.
Thanks for great videos. But yeah, as you say, I find that you can kind of kill some people in the mid game because a whole bunch of folks are looking to do that strategy. So if you are not, you kind of have free reign to get the things that you do want.
The current BG's meta will need some adjustment. I think Leapfrogger is maybe the most visible example of something where it seems like it's unbeatable, and then they move it 1 tier and it's fine. Which is exactly how people reacted to Macaw. They were like, when they first released Macaw, they're like, this is crazy, I can't believe they put this in. Then they moved it to tier 3, it's like, oh, it's fine. And so, I'm sure that Leapfrogger at tier 3 would be okay, maybe tier 4, I don't know, I don't think it needs to go that far. But there are other outliers that feel pretty crazy. Whelp Smuggler still feels really, really, really strong. Impatient Doomsayer, if you get it quickly, still feels really strong. There are a lot of units that I think create a snowbally early advantage that I'm glad the 15 damage cap is in the game. But they just replaced 30-something cards. Of course they're going to need to change some stuff and balance some stuff, and I have been enjoying the meta. I'm not wired enough into the competitive scene to understand really where the major problems are. But I'd be really surprised if we didn't see multiple changes with the balance patch coming in the next couple weeks. And I don't think that we need major reworking. But there are enough things, especially at low tiers, that seem like they're core building blocks of really powerful strategies that are hard to counter, that I wouldn't be surprised to see some nudges there.
Yeah, I see people also mentioning Impatient Doomsayer in chat, which has been one of my more favorite minions to play because generating free resources is good. But I definitely could see this one getting a nudge either in tier or number of avenge minions to get free demons. But yeah, free resources, regardless of what they are pretty good. And the fact that it can also give you soul devourers, which is kind of gross, which is a lot of free gold, kind of snowballs pretty big.
Yeah, they need to make some changes. I don't think it's urgent, but I think that they need to do so, and I think they will.
I also love the avenge mechanic. I think it
Oh, yeah.
works so well. I think that one specifically, like Doomsayer, probably just needs a tier adjustment, most likely. But I don't see the Nest Matron nearly as much as I would expect to, and that one's very similar, but a tier up. And I mean, Battlecry minions are generally pretty solid. There's a lot of good Battlecry minions.
Yeah. I've played a little bit with the Battlecry one, but yeah, it comes so much later in the game that it feels like it's a lot less effective. And
It's crazy how much, and also just like 4-star minions are so much better than 3-star minions that like Doomsayer is, is just going to outclass a lot of the other 3-stars. Where there's a decent amount of 4-stars that will just outclass the Nest Matron.
Yeah,
and I think with the Impatient Doomsayer, since it specifically gives you demons, if you pick it up early, you're gonna get your imp thing that summons more imps, and one of those is a single avenge trigger already. You can get the taunt that summons a 1/1, so it kind of gives you these minions that are perfect for fueling itself, and occasionally they're sort of fine in the moment, and you're like, great, well, I'm going to use this gold that I would have used to dig for units to just level, and you just use the units that you get from the Impatient Doomsayer to keep you alive.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's a powerful thing. It's I would be surprised to see it stay at its current configuration. They have a bunch of numbers they can change in the card. Also, has 6 health, which is a lot of health. Like that's a good bit. It doesn't always die when it gets hit.
Yeah, I'm glad. It would be it would be such a tilting minion if you just played it and it gets attacked and killed every time. Like the point of it is to generate demons. I'm okay with it generating less than 2 demons a turn, because when it generates 2 demons in a turn, it feels pretty like a pretty unsurmountable advantage. But like if it's giving you 1 extra demon a turn on average, sometimes none, sometimes more, then I'm more happy with that. But if it's doing that because it just gets gibbed by a random attack, then it's less fun. Also, the fact that the 1-star minion with the Taunt Reborn goes so well with it and is something you pick up consistently early, might be a reason why it's quite good.
Yeah, Acolyte of Cthulhu is actually really, really strong with a lot of things right now. It's a really good minion. All right, what else we got in the news? Only a couple more things.
Yeah, so Book of Mercenaries, is it Tasman or Tamsin?
Tamsin. Tammy.
Well, if I say Tammy, I don't... Okay. Unfortunately, I am super far behind on my Book of Mercenaries. I feel like one of these comes out every week, and then I'm always saying I haven't had a chance to check it out. Yeah. Or maybe we were talking about it coming out last week, and it just feels like one comes out every week.
That is true. That is what happened. Edel has played through some of it, I think.
No, I was playing through my backlog because I have a need to do things in order, and so I couldn't start on Tamsin's story because I didn't finish the earlier ones yet.
Oh, so you are way behind. Okay, I understand now. Well, the feedback we've gotten from our Discord and multiple other Discords I've been in is that the story is excellent, and that specifically Chapter 8, the last chapter, is incredibly dark. That is what I have heard. That is really, really intense story-wise. No spoilers, but that is what I have heard from multiple sources.
I mean, she is a warlock.
An undead warlock. Yeah.
Right. So, I guess lastly, for news, we have some new Battlegrounds cosmetic bundles out, including the Champions of Shadow, and I believe also Battlegrounds Brutes is out too, right? Both of these are out? I think it's 2, right?
I think so.
But some pretty cool hero portraits. They're definitely pushing really hard on these new Battleground skins. I know the first sets I was really excited to support a mode that I put a lot of time into, and I think they did a great job with. But I don't know about both of you. I mean, I know Edel doesn't play as much Battlegrounds as I do, but it feels like they're pushing these out quite quickly. Maybe they just have a big backlog of these, but I don't know. Doesn't it feel like they're doing a lot of these Battlegrounds bundles in very quick succession?
Yeah, it does.
It's been like 3 in a month, right? 3 sets of 2 in a month.
Yeah, it feels like they're maybe trying to make up for lost time or something. But you'd think that they will run out soon then? I don't know. They are all still really cool. But I was a little surprised. You know how you get the notification when there's something new in the shop? And I obsessively need to get rid of the red dot. So I went in the shop one day and got rid of the notification for the Heroes bundle, right? And then the next day, I'm like, what's going on? I thought I got rid of this notification. I go in and I had no idea that there was also a Shadow bundle. So it was kind of surprising, as you say, how quickly they're putting out these things one after the next.
Yeah,
And honestly,
I mean,
surprisingly, they don't have these don't have new bobs, right?
there is a Mega Bob in the shop. I don't know if this one also has a bartender. I don't think it does. But they have a separately available purchasable new Bob, Mega Bob. He's like a Zordon sort of thing. It's a digital head.
Well,
yeah.
It's going to take a lot for me to get rid of my cute Bob.
Yes, Fizzy.
It's going to take a lot for me to get rid of Fizzy. I like Fizzy a lot. Fizzy does not say things that make me think that they're trying to purposefully upset me.
And Tiki Rag, who is my favorite, explicitly says they're trying to upset me, which I appreciate the candor. Appreciate how straightforward that that Tiki Rag is. Yeah, I mean, if you're a dedicated BG's player and the shop just never had anything for you, now there's always something in the shop. But if you try and keep up with all the modes right now, it is overwhelming. And there's just a lot of stuff. And Mercenaries is not going to make that any better. So it is just a different relationship with the store now, that there's always going to be something in there, and it's all about choosing not to buy more often than not, I think. It's usually where I land, because they also have pack bundles all the time that I basically never buy anymore, because it's pretty typical for me to have the entire set by the end of the first week, usually.
I do think it might be a good idea if once Mercenaries is released, they put just anything shop related to it in its own shop within the Mercenaries tab. Because right now, of course, the only place to put those pre-purchase bundles is in the Hearthstone shop. But if they do sets or special promotion, crossover, whatever, and have bundles going with those, it maybe could be better on people if they were just in the Mercenaries shop instead of the overall shop.
So you're saying we should have a separate client?
No, don't enable. No. There's going to be a merchant cart in the Mercenaries Village. We know about the merchant cart. I assume that most of the things will be in the merchant cart, and the base store will probably just have a link to the merchant cart, where they send you to the cart.
Right.
That would be my assumption. Because otherwise, it's going to be overwhelming. And it's with the amount of monetization they seem to be putting towards Mercenaries, I imagine they will have regular bundles and sales and whatever. That would be overwhelming if they were in the normal shop. We'll see. I don't know. Nobody knows. We're still waiting for more Mercenaries information. Watch this space. TBD.
Yep. And that's mostly everything we have for news this week, because since we recorded on a Friday last week, Kat reminded me that the XR AMA is usually on Fridays, so we covered it last week. But we do have a little bit of tournament stuff in here, so I'll send it over to Hat.
Let's go.
It's the Grand Tournament!
All right, let's talk about tournament talk. So first, this is the item that I want to get your feedback on. Masters Tour Undercity, the next Masters Tour on November 19th. There was a tweet that went out today. Upon review of player and viewer feedback, we are adjusting the Masters Tour Undercity broadcast to begin at 6 a.m. Pacific on November 19th. Qualifiers begin tonight, etc., etc. 6 a.m. Pacific time is 9 a.m. Eastern US, 3 p.m. Central European, and terrible in Asia. Like, bad. That starts at, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 or 11 o'clock for most places, 1 a.m. if you're in Australia. This would be the second year in a row they have moved an APAC-timed Masters Tour to either a North America or European-friendly time. So, I don't know what player feedback they heard, but it seems that in English-speaking areas, the feedback maybe is weighted a little bit more. There have already been some Asia players that have expressed that they are very concerned that this has happened twice in a row now, 2 years in a row, and I don't really understand the motivation behind moving the start time of a pre-announced schedule. It seems not great for the Asia players. I'm sure the European and American players are happy, but it seems not great for the Asia players, and I don't really understand what the player and viewer feedback would have been, because it seems like that the Asia Pacific players would have much rather kept it right where it is. Thoughts?
Yeah, it seems really bizarre considering the way that all of these times were proposed was basically, hey, this one's for this region, this one's for that region, this one's for the other region. So if the whole point was that, well, your home region, you get sort of the home time, and then to have that taken from you not once but twice, feels like you were kind of lied to. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't really follow. And the recent Masters Tour performances have been kind of dominated by the China region. You would think with the popularity and engagement of that region, they would actually get more times for that time, as opposed to more for Western regions. But I would just expect it to, well, stick with the announcement. That's kind of what I would expect, and it didn't, and I don't know why, and it seems pretty clearly unfair to the players that live in that time zone have to play yet another overnighter. So, we'll see. I don't know. As far as Grandmasters goes, in Week 3, Dreadeye won over Luna in the Americas region, Seiko over RDU, and Tice over Okasinsuke. Possessi is totally crushing the Asia-Pacific region. Gabby and Frenetic are tied for first in Europe, and Nalgadon is at the top of the Americas region. In Week 3, it was Conquest. You saw a lot of Demon Hunter, both Fel and Brute. A lot of Warlock, almost entirely Handlock, and then a lot of Rogues that were in. There were some Poison Rogues, and this was also, last week was when Garrote Rogue was starting to pick up. It was like kind of still Miracle-esque at that point. Shaman was right behind there. For Week 4, it's last hero standing. Lot more Rogue, still a ton of Warlock, but Rogue is the second most popular class, and Garrote Rogue is definitely something that you should expect to see a lot of at high levels of play. The win rate isn't really there statistically, but a lot of high-level players are swearing by it, and the games that it wins in a very flashy, visible way. So you're also seeing, since it's last hero standing, remember, last hero standing, you get to counter-queue into what your opponent is playing, a lot of Celestial Druids, because the mage matchup is really, really good for Celestial Druid. Shaman still has its spot, but the format is kind of warped into a bunch of decks that Shaman doesn't beat, because if your deck loses to Perpetual Flame, you're probably not bringing it, with the exception of maybe Shadow Priest. As far as qualifiers, Shadow Priest is the best deck, but Handlock is busted because it's the second best deck in terms of win rate, and also the highest banned deck. It is the most frequently banned. So what that's telling you is that the players that think they have a plan to beat Handlock, when they're leaving it up, Handlock's still winning almost as much as the best deck in the format. There's no real effective way to consistently target it, because sometimes it just gets the right draws, and Cult Neophyte in that deck has really put a lot of work in solving some of those bad matchups if you have it at the right time, especially like Glide DH. You have Neophyte on 2, Glide DH kind of just can't keep up. Same with like Celestial Druid or whatever, Handlock actually has a good chance there. So, Handlock pretty busted. the most banned deck, second highest win rate deck. Shadow Priest is the highest win rate. Face Hunter third. Fell Demon Hunter fourth. Control Priest fifth? Huh? If you want to target Quest Shaman, you put some posts and Ogremancers or whatever in your priest deck. You don't actually win with the quests. You just play control. But there are a lot of ways to play control priest and win with it in a conquest format because you're targeting a lot of the decks that are, well, the targets. You're kind of meta targeting the things that are trying to beat Handlock by getting under it. You can beat a lot of those decks with control priest. Don't play Rush Warrior. Probably shouldn't play Celestial Druid. Quest Mage really not doing well. Everyone seems to have a plan for it. The winners this past week didn't have as much Handlock. There was a lot of Demon Hunter. Fell and Brute were both popular. A lot of Quest Shaman, a lot of Shadow Priest. There was a good mix of Garrote Poison and classic Miracle Rogues. A lot of options with Rogue. As far as ladder goes, the Vicious Syndicate report is out. Again, this is basically every other week because they keep nerfing stuff. Honestly, this is a really interesting meta right now. Shadow Priest is still the best deck at the moment, with Handlock right behind it. And Taunt Druid and Face Hunter are both strong, but underplayed. Contact and Garrote Rogue, a lot of people have talked about this week. It is a super duper high skill cap deck. It is actually very difficult to play, but if you look overall at the win rate, the numbers aren't really there. Claims players are making is that like it's actually the best deck, but it's so hard to play. Very similar of Lifesteal Demon Hunter in previous metas. Garrote Rogue does look extremely difficult to play, and the best players are winning a lot with it, but that's because they're the best players. Overall, a lot of the litany around this deck seems to be like, well, if you ignore all the losses, then the deck is amazing. And that's not wrong, and players that are better with the deck do win a lot more with it, and it is quite powerful. But as of right now, the win rate looks in the 46-47% range. The rhetoric is overpowering the stats. We'll see if that changes. But as of right now, don't expect this to terrorize your Portionate ladder unless you're at very high legend. And even then, it's quite beatable. If you look at HS replay the past 3 days, at legend, Shadow Priest is the only tier 1 deck ahead of Taunt Druid, Handlock, and Face Hunter, very similar to Vicious Syndicate. And also, we have data from Tianding. Tweeted more information about what's actually good from their end, from the top 1% of players. Shadow Priest number 1, Face Hunter 2, Handlock 3, Taunt Druid 4. The story is very consistent. Poison Rogue is 5th overall on Tian's list, which is quite high for Poison Rogue, but it makes sense because it's good against, well, Handlock and other stuff. Can be okay against Quest Shaman, very good against Mage. There's also some other decks on here. They call it Spell Druid, I assume. That is Anaconda. They have Secret Paladin that's quite nice. Quest Demon Hunter is above 50%. Quest Shaman's above 50%. Death Rattle Demon Hunter, the 10th best deck, but just under 50%. And then there's a lot more going all the way down, like Handbuff Paladin, Libram Paladin, Quest Lifesteal DH, Fell DH, Quest Rogue, so on and so forth. Quite a few decks listed here. And also there's some follow-up information in the replies about Wild. The highest win rates one, number 1, of course, is Questlock. Even Warlock, even Hunter, Aggro Shadow Priest, and Celestial Druid are the top 5. The order might not be that exact order. Interesting. So, Handlock seems quite good. Should we talk about it?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
So, Handlock, like we mentioned, when it first sort of made its debut in this set, plays, honestly, a lot like it always has. You are going to tap a bunch, usually your first 2 or even 3 turns, and you're going to play minions that don't really cost as much as they should for their stats. You sometimes finish out by playing a Battlemaster, but I honestly haven't died to quite as many Battlemasters from this deck anymore. A lot of times it's just play big minions, even if you have an answer to the first ones, they raise dead, and do it all over again. So it's a lot of life gain, a lot of removal, and a whole lot of inevitability, because even if you can deal with the big minions, Tamsin is a threat, and completing that quest means that they have burst in the form of just backfire, raise dead, or sometimes taking fatigue. Usually it does not get to that point. So this is definitely a much more dangerous version of Handlock than, the first ones. You do have the healing to really swing things back in your favor. Hat was mentioning playing 36 power in one turn. Like, that's very doable because you make some Tamsin removal plays for a ton of healing and just your giants are free. This deck really can go pretty nuts.
Yeah, there's the amount of healing there is quite strong, and it reminds me, the healing suite reminds me a lot of Q-Block era, where you would just end up with these huge health swings from your Spellstones and your Dark Packs and whatever. Touch of the Nathrazim, Drain Soul, and Bristleback in particular. A lot of the Handlock builds have evolved to make sure the Delete Lock cards get online. Soul Rend is obviously very powerful, but Baron Scavenger and Bristleback, you get to heal so much, along with the 2 ticks of the quest that just, they don't really heal you so much as undo the damage from your self-damage cards. But you end up, there will be a lot of games where you're under 10 and then you end the game when you're over 20. It happens a lot, quite frequently. So, very powerful there, and your minions don't really cost very much, because your Gnolls cost 1 or 2, your Anetheron, if you play it, costs 1, your Flesh Giants. The nerf, you do notice the nerf. The cards do come down slower at 10 than they did at 9 or 8, but you will still get to a point where they cost a very small amount of mana or no mana at all. And if you're playing with Rod, sometimes you undo the nerf, or both nerfs.
So, yeah, let's talk about some of those variants. We have sort of the standard Handlock that we were doing before the nerfs. We've had a couple evolutions, one with the Ruined Mithril Rod, as you talked about earlier. There's also been they're calling it Fatigue Lock, which I guess is basically you've got fatiguing yourself as the primary win condition, kind of like the 6D Warlock, but much slower. I really have just played the standard one, and that one has no rods. It is falling out of favor, it's not quite as hot, but it's slightly better against minions, and oddly enough, better against Glide, I guess just because you have such a density of threats that even after they hit you with a Glide, if you have done the work towards reducing your giants or whatever, like, you can just have a discounted giant, so once you got hit with the Glide, you could still play something big, etc.
Yeah, the Rod list, you typically play pretty heavily into having a full hand of discounted cards, and then when they get glided away, then you kind of lose. And if you trigger a Rod once, the Glide will trigger the Rod again, but only on the 4 cards that you get off the Glide, or possibly less if you have partial progress in the second tick, and it undoes all of your work. So the standard list usually keeps Backfire, but not always. The Rod list always keeps Backfire, and one of the strongest plays that you can make is coin Rod into Backfire, and getting that hand glided is game-losing. Whereas standard Handlock, you're much more likely to keep cards like Neophyte, which you already want to do with both versions. You're less likely to build a large hand that's capable of being disrupted, because you can just kind of play your minions and your stuff on curve, and you don't keep quite as many cards in hand as the Rod list does.
Gotcha, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and Fatigue Lock's weird. I wouldn't call it compared to Stealer, because Stealer was kind of all about, like, you had that really big swing turn, and then you killed your opponent by having them pay for your spells with their face. You could get to Fatigue, but that wasn't how you won. You won by casting 25 mana worth of stuff with their life. So this reminds me more of, it's actually surprisingly close to Garrote Rogue, of draw your entire deck and then your opponent dies. But also old school Togwaggle Druid, if we go way back, where you would draw a bunch and ramp a bunch and not die and then clear your deck out and then you would win. Reminds me a lot of that deck. I think this version is much better if you're playing a lot of mirror matches, and is much better against Mage because you don't have to really play any minions. You get to run things like Armor Vendor as well, but it feels a lot worse in the minion matchups. It's a bit depolarized, just because you're not going to cheat out a bunch of 8/8s and then kill people with them. Your game naturally goes a little bit longer, and that can often be a bad thing.
Yeah, and because of that, we're not going to talk about the Fatigue Warlock as much today. We haven't played as much of it, and it is a very different feel and very different play pattern. We're really just going to focus on the ones that are trying to get through to the first tick of the quest so that you can discount your flesh giants, get a large hand size, and just play a whole bunch of discounted things. I think of note, we are not running the 4 mana make a minion equal to your hand size because it is too slow. We do not even pay 4 mana for things generally. So you're really looking to be filling up your hand, playing Goldshire Nulls, playing a Netheron, and doing enough yo-yoing your life total to play really, really cheap flesh giants.
Yeah. And among other things, we also, the deck is built currently, especially the Rod build. You get your delete lock cards online very, very quickly. Your Baron Scavengers and your Bristlebacks, you will often have these online by turn 6 or 7. And once these are online, it is very, very difficult to beat you on the board. It's very easy to just gain a ton of life back and kill all the stuff that your opponent is playing, and also play your free 6/6 taunts, or 1 mana 6/6 taunts, are not all that different from Flesh Giants, and being able to play multiples of those and they're also taunts means that you just kind of win the board out of nowhere. It's very common to do that.
Yeah. So these decks, very powerful. They do beat most things. That's why they have, such a high win rate, but they're especially good against Quest Shaman, Fell Demon Hunter, the Rogues, and Celestial Druid. I think Celestial Druid in particular can be hilarious when you're just filling up your hand, they play Celestial Alignment, and you just puke your whole board of minions.
Yeah, a single Rod discount means your entire hand is free.
Well, or just, don't they discount after, right? So Flesh Giant goes to 1 and then
yeah, Flesh Giant
is free.
Yeah.
Goldshire Null costs 1 and then reduces for your hand and is free. So really not the kind of synergy as the Celestial Alignment Druid that you want to be giving to your opponent.
Yep. And also, you can just fire off Occult Neophyte at the end of that, and then the turn they get, they cannot play anything. Yeah. You would think Celestial Druid would be a counter to this deck, but it is very much not. It's actually quite favorable for the Handlock. But what Handlock doesn't really want to see, well, damage from hand is a big deal for beating Handlock. I talked about Poison Rogue earlier today. Poison Rogue is maybe the worst matchup. It's up there. Very, very difficult to beat. They've got Cloak of Shadows. They got a ton of burn. They got a bunch of attack from their face. Your healing spells don't have targets. Your Soul Rends don't really do anything. It kind of functionally... It fundamentally operates in a different way than your deck does. Quest Mage is closer, but still not great and still not a deck that you want to see. And Giants in particular are pretty weak to being frozen, and that happens a lot when they are the first minions that you really play. Neophytes help, but it's still a very challenging matchup. And if you're playing against board decks, Shadow Priest and Face Hunter can get there. That's really just like Soul Rend or no is the big question against Shadow Priest. And against Hunter, it depends if they have a good opening with Felmaw into damage from hand. Also, if you are building up a large hand and you don't tempo out stuff, and then you get glided, you will lose that game. In particular, one of the minions that really sets up troublesome board states for Warlock is Guardian Og Merchant, because you don't usually have the ability to wipe the board and also kill something behind it, especially if that's a Void Touch Tenant. So well-timed Guardian Og Merchants can be a real problem.
Does that mean the Divine Shield Paladin would be okay against this too?
It
or is
can
that
be.
Not
They're
in
slow and they have no burn.
Spot?
Slow and no burn from hand. Like, you need to have some kind of damage from hand. Shadow Priest also gets to keep up a lot better because Raise Dead's a card. And you do things like, there are Shadow Priest draws where you just go crazy, where it's like Gandling 0 mana minions, then you Raise Dead, then you get them back. And also you end up with just burn from hand and Void Touch Tenant. Paladin, it can be annoying, and Secret Paladin in particular I think is fine against Handlock. But if you get behind on board, you're not really catching back up. And if they hit you with the Soul Rend and get into the Bristlebacks and the Scavengers, Paladin doesn't really have a good way to deal with that. Oh, also, Shadow Priest, as Sarah Sion is saying in chat. Shadow Priest has a Lucia. You don't want to get a Lucia ever. But I don't know if she's going to be long for this world. Funny digression. She is the highest win rate mulligan card for Shadow Priest, which is disgusting. That's not how that should work. But
That's not how that should work at all.
But it makes sense, right? Because you get ahead and then you give them a turn off. Of course you're going to win. I don't know.
I never expected, with all the complaints about Elucia before and in Control Priests and all the issues people have had, I never expected that Elucia's day may come because it's being used by an aggro deck to say, hey, okay, my hand's gone. Here, let's skip your turn so that I can just kill you.
Yeah. It reminds me very much of how Frost Nova started to be used proactively in Conjurer's Calling Mage and Rise of Shadows. You would just make 4 8/8s and then freeze your opponent's board, and what could they do? So this is you freeze their ability to play cards that matter for a turn, and that's not a great gameplay experience. Yeah. So yeah, you can absolutely lose to the board-based decks, which is why I think Shadow Priest is showing up as number 1 on so many tier lists. It's very, very powerful against these decks if you don't get Soul Rended, but Handlock can keep up if you have the Soul Rend, or if you have... There are ways to get good draws if you go first and you have Drain Soul, maybe, and you're able to backfire into something crazy. I don't know. There are ways to do it, but it feels really difficult if they have a good opening and you don't have Soul Rend.
Speaking of openings, in terms of mulligans for this deck, you're pretty much looking for Tour Guide, Backfire, and if you are playing the Rod version, Ruined Mithril Rod, of course, it's the grease for your whole deck. Lowering mana cost is good, turns out. Against certain strategies, you'll want Soul Rend. It's just your major removal for resetting the board, and it also digs you through your deck to turn on your delete lock cards. So it serves a kind of dual function, and generally when you are beating the Face Hunters and the Shadow Priests, it is because you get off a really solid Soul Rend and then can use your point removal to keep them from getting back onto the board, as well as healing yourself. And it's also good against Quest Shaman, because Quest Shaman, a lot of their early stuff is playing minions, so you do kind of get to kill that stuff and get to your, again, delete locks swing cards much more quickly.
Yeah, Bodicus, I know we did Quest Shaman last week. You said you kept Feral Spirits against Mage. What did you normally find yourself mulliganing for as the Shaman against Warlocks? Besides guidance.
Pretty much just guidance.
Yeah, okay.
Like, that's the only card I really cared about against Warlock, just because against Warlock you need to complete your quest quickly, because anything you do before completing your quest doesn't really matter, because they generally will heal out of it, and the only way you're ever dealing with their board states is by having the quest completed and Brucon being played. And then sometimes you can keep up, and sometimes you can't. Like, even after you complete quests, sometimes you just can't keep up with a bunch of 8/8s.
Yeah, 8/8s are good. The matchup is definitely heavily favored for the Warlock, but Quest Shaman can get there, and Soul Rend just makes sure that there's no real chance of the early game snowballing outside of control.
Yeah, usually the games I'd win would be where Bog Slosher sticks. And then if you're lucky, you get like a Wind Fury or something and kill him. But that matchup is pretty abysmal. Although Doomhammer Quest Shaman, that's the way. I've played against it a few times. That seems like the way to go with Quest Shaman nowadays.
That's the new hotness that's like just come out. I know Vicious Syndicate put it out. I think Monsanto had played it in Grandmasters last week. There's so little information on that right now, but I will say that when I'm a Warlock, I don't like getting my face hit with a hammer. I have not enjoyed that experience. So that may be the answer. Yeah.
Well, in terms of the Warlock side of things still, going back to Mulligan's, Drain Soul is kind of fine against the Shadow Priests and the Hunters. It just takes out an early minion. I know against Priest, you really need to be able to deal with a turn 1 Void Touch Attendant if that is the strategy they go for, because oh boy, that racks up quickly. It's it's especially good against this deck because your taps that you want to be doing to advance your quest, they hurt you more too. So
That's just quest progress. Let's just do it. Quest progress.
yeah,
And when the quest complete, it also heals you more.
Yeah.
that is true.
And then you
So-
die.
Bot brings up a good point that say it only takes you 2 taps to advance your quest, and then because it has life steal when it deals the damage to them, you gain 4 instead of 3. But it will still kill you very quickly to not be able to deal with a Void Touch Attendant. That is often what I try and do as the Shadow Priest against Warlocks. You'll want to be keeping Neophyte against Druids, Mages, and Demon Hunters. Those are really the spell-heavy classes. I kind of think Demon Hunter, especially, like just slowing down that quest, the 1 mana attacks is very important there.
Yeah. And when to play Neophyte is very important. Against Demon Hunter, well, okay, if you're going first, and you're against any of these classes, Druid, Demon Hunter, or Mage, especially if they quest on 1, probably just fire it off on 2. Against Druid, your goal is not to save it till after Celestial, your goal is to do it on their Overgrowth turn. You want to slow down the Overgrowth turn, because after they Celestial, you're playing their game, you want them to be playing yours. A quick Neophyte will usually get you there, and also the important thing about early Neophytes, if they die, your Raised Deads become backbreaking. Really, really strong to have Neophyte in the Raised Dead pool in these matchups, which is why against Mage also you usually want to get it out pretty quickly. If you're going first, then you deal with coin flow. If you're going second, then you deal with flow. So, pretty nice to have that in the pool early, and there have been games where I've been like quad Neophyted by Warlocks as any of these decks, and it's just a devastating experience. Against Garrote Rogue, you don't keep it in the mill. You play it the turn that you play Giants, and then the turn, which is also the turn before you're dead. That's the same turn. Play it that turn. Usually turn 7 or 8. After you get stuff in play, that's when you're Neophyting them. You really have to target it, and they play so many spells the turn they go off that it can be very effective, even if they have multiple Octobots, because sometimes they just don't have the right thing, but you have to time that specifically. You can't just fire off the Neophytes against Garrote Rogue. It doesn't do anything. So there's a lot of opportunity to be very precise about how you time your Neophytes. We're really only keeping them in the mull. We're not keeping them in the mull against Rogue because it's not good on turn 2 against Rogue. We're keeping them against decks where you want to play it on turn 2 most of the time.
Yeah, and I would say...
I was just going to ask real quick. Against Celestial, would you not just wait till after they Celestial?
I don't want their deck to get off the ground. I want to slow the game down enough that I can get... The way you beat Celestial is by having crap in play when they play Celestial. That's how we beat them. So if we wait until after, they usually get to like ramp into Celestial and get to the point where our stuff isn't cheap enough quite yet. Especially if Baron Scavenger is not online, because the difference between being at 10 cards or lower and not being at 10 cards and lower is huge. So most of the time I find myself playing Neophyte beforehand so I can hit them in the face, and then get it back off Raised Deads when they Lunar Eclipse it, and then just destabilize their ramp, because the way they get to, if they Celestial quickly, then it's really hard for you to play a bunch of stuff, but if you have more time to set up your hand a little bit more, it's usually better for you.
And overdrawn to burn cards do not count towards Rune Mithril Rod, correct?
Correct. You never draw them.
For myself, I also tend to keep with this deck Goldshire Null just quite frequently, because it is both defense and offense, and it's something I'm generally interested in hitting with Raised Dead. So against, the decks where Neophyte is good, maybe not so much, but if you know that they're going to be playing minions, I'm fine with keeping Goldshire Null, even against something like a Paladin, just because you're still often going to want to be tapping to fill up your hand early, and I've had games where I play a Goldshire Null, kill something, raise dead, play it again, and the second raise dead gets back 2 of them. It's just a really effective tool for clearing stuff while making your own. And yeah, I imagine even in the Rod version, right? If it gets a Rod discount, you can get it to 0, right?
Yeah. I usually won't keep it because I expect that if my deck is functioning as intended, I will find one if I need one. It's really good in the mid game 4 and 5 or so, and I don't usually keep things that I play on turn 4 or 5 outside of Soul Rend, so I don't typically keep in the mulligan. But if you get to the point where you can play it for 0 off of a Rod discount, that's obviously the Stone Cold Nuts. Yeah.
Well, we've kind of talked about some of these play patterns already. We're basically like a ramp druid, except your ramp is tapping, because tapping fills up your hand and it advances your quest. And if you have gone 3 taps, which completes the first phase of the quest, you are discounting your giants by 4, which is pretty significant, while also bringing you towards 1 mana Goldshire Nulls or 1 mana Anetheron. So even if you feel like, gosh, I really need to deal with this board, a lot of times you're just going to be tapping early, or maybe even just Tour Guide tap. Sometimes the Tour Guide can be important for proccing a Divine Shield or something, or just getting a little hit in before you play that Soul Rend to swing things back in your favor.
Yeah, it's very easy to feel like that tapping will lose you the game, but not tapping loses you the game too because your cards don't work. You are dependent on getting stuff discounted and getting to 10 cards or less in your deck. You are very good at it if you trust the deck, and that means your life total will get low sometimes. So when you're facing down scary minions, sometimes you just tap and it's fine, and you just keep going. Sometimes you can't afford to do so. Sometimes you have to Neophyte on 2, like we said, instead of tapping. But whenever you're behind in your quest, your deck just doesn't work the same way. So a lot of times, like on turn 3, tap then Tour Guide for the next turn is quite common. That comes up a lot just to make sure that you have the mana available the next turn. It's often correct to get more stuff in play of your own, like playing the Tour Guide before the Soul Rend, because the extra card milled makes a big difference. You get closer to your discounted cards. You need to trust the deck to function, and that means you need to self-damage yourself in order to get the life back and to get your cards online, because we are not a control deck in a traditional sense of let the game go long and win that way. You can, but what you really want to do is slow the game down for about 4 turns, then speed it up in your favor on your terms by playing a bunch of giant minions and hitting your opponent in the face and killing all the stuff that they try and play that keeps you from doing that. So trust the deck to function that way. You usually should be tapping at least the first couple turns, like after you play Demon Seed. Usually turn 2, turn 3 if you don't have Backfire, usually tapping, or if you don't have Rod. And you need to make sure that you get through your deck and start generating some momentum in order to actually win the game. Because if you hold off tapping because you're afraid of dying, the choice you're making is, do I want to die now when I know it, or die later when I don't because my cards don't work? And it's not actually better to make the game longer if you're going to lose anyways. Just make them have it, and if they don't, then usually you win.
And I have a question for you, Hat. So obviously Backfire is very strong on the play, because you play the quest on 1, you start with fewer cards in hand when you're on the play. So it's really easy to just go tap on 1, Backfire on... Or sorry, not 1. Tap on 2, Backfire on 3. But I have found sometimes that because I want to be tapping earlier, it can be harder to play the Backfire. So I would often, on the coin, rather still go for the taps, I mean, depending on what I'm up against, rather than coining a Backfire on 2.
Yeah, it's... Coin Backfire on 2 is something that you do if you really need to get a Noel online, or you have an Anetheron in your hand, or something like that. And obviously, if you have Rod, it's coin Rod on 2 into Backfire on 3, because that triggers an instant discount. It's gross. It's so gross. I think that it depends a lot on the matchup, but usually if I have Backfire on coin, unless I need to find a Soul Rend. If I'm in a matchup where I need to find a Soul Rend, then you coin it out. and then you have to figure out what am I going to do with my turn 3, which is you trying to set up like a Drain Soul, Touch of the Nathrazim or something like that, set up Mortal Coils. If you don't need to backfire to look for something, and you have the time, then yeah, tap on 2, tap on 3 is totally okay. And then you save the backfire for the second part of the quest, because in the second part of the quest where you need 7 self-damage, tap, and then either a backfire or raised dead is very common, and having that 3 damage breakpoint is really vital if you have the time to set up the taps and for that to be relevant. Because yeah, if you just tap on 2, backfire on 3, then you're at exactly 10 cards, and that's really, really awkward. You can go coin Tour Guide at that point if you want to, and that's usually the best thing to do. But often it is better to just tap there instead, unless you really need a specific card, which is almost always Soul Rend at that point in the game.
And one thing from old Handlock that is solved by having the quest in your deck is in original Handlock, you couldn't tap on 2 and 3 if you were on the coin, because, again, that problem of getting up to 10 cards. But since you always have the quest as your turn 1 play with this deck, you could tap on 2, tap on 3, and you'll be right where you want to be, which is 9 cards with your draw putting you up to 10 on turn 4.
Yep.
So
go ahead.
So in terms of the mid game, you're really going to be pushing the quest. You do have to be careful with your hand size. You don't necessarily need to get Tamsin in play, but you want to get those first 2 phases of the quest complete because they make your flesh giants so much cheaper. You really want to have something pretty big down by turns 5 or 6 at the latest.
Yep. And don't be afraid to proactively raise dead to make giants cheaper and just to get like a Tour Guide and a Neophyte back or whatever. Be careful of your hand size. You have to raise dead on 9 when you know you're going to play something after. And also, if you're in the 3rd phase of the quest, you have to raise dead on 8. On 8 cards in hand, because you raised it on 9 cards in hand, then you lose Big Tammy, and that's bad. So be careful about that. I have made that mistake multiple times in the past few days. It's just a thing that happens sometimes, but don't raise dead on 9 cards in hand if you are in phase 3 of the quests. Just be careful. Because, yeah, very easy to make that mistake.
Even barring the losing quest reward, I think this is one of the trickiest parts of the deck to get used to, is just keeping track of your hand size and how playing things like Raise Dead are going to affect that, tapping, backfire, etc. There's a lot of just numbers to keep track of, numbers in your deck, numbers in your hand, numbers in terms of what things cost while they're in your hand at different hand sizes. I've definitely had turns where I thought I could get everything in play, but then you forget that once you play the Anetheron at 1 mana, the Goldshire Null costs 2 mana, or vice versa, you play the Goldshire Null and now you can't play Anetheron. There's a lot of tracking in terms of all those numbers to make sure that you're going to be able to play everything that you want to play.
And also, make sure that you're keeping track of your raised dead pools too, because there have been so many times where I've raised dead like, I have no idea what I'm getting back. I have no clue what's in there. I find that raised deading back giants and scavengers and all that is actually a lot less common in this deck, just because there's so many minions now and a lot of low curve ones, and also that's fine. I've won a whole bunch of games by raised deading back Pantharas just for more fatigue, draw, burn damage.
Well, and Tour Guide is honestly really great to get back. You know, some games you will want to not play a Tour Guide so that you can get back your Anetheron specifically or your big stuff. But if you get 1 threat and a Tour Guide back, it's still really great because it's so efficient, just reducing your hero power or getting the opportunity to make your hero power for next turn free. It's a very, very flexible card, and having more of them is generally pretty good for the deck.
Yep. Though,
So
I
having
will
a touch
say,
target.
yes.
It's like a very, very good touch target.
I will say you pretty rarely want to coin out guide and tap on 1. I very rarely do that. You're going to be better served by saving the coin for something that affects the board more. You don't really need to get a 1/1 out that quickly, and you don't need to make quest progress that quickly. It's rarely worth it. You'll have a use for that coin later.
Yeah, Tour Guide's also really good for doing like turn 1 quest, turn 2 tap, turn 3 tap, and then Tour Guide.
Yep.
So that your turn 4 has just a free quest completion plus 4 mana to do whatever you want.
Yep. That was what made Giant at 8 so incredibly busted, is that you would just play a Flesh Giant there. Yeah. They nerfed it. Hooray. Yeah. And
So in terms of late game, you really just want to keep the pressure on. Once you've got those mid-game threats down, you are not just trying to remove their things or anything. We're not a patient control deck. You just want to put the gas on and try and kill them as quickly as possible after you play the Giants. You're still tapping aggressively throughout, just to make sure that you've got the resources to make sure they never have a break. And once you've got your delete lock cards online, you can get that health back pretty easily from the bristlebacks. Throw taunts in the way. You have plenty of defensive tools. I think there's tons of games I have where I thought I had them on the ropes. I was about to kill them, and then they just have that one big swing turn where they gain a ton of life, remove my board, and then make this massive board of 6/6 taunts and an 8/6, etc. You really are just trying to keep the opponent from having any time to be able to deal with your big boards.
yeah. And also, there is the bonus threat of you can just get to the end of the game and then kill them with your hero power. And oftentimes, if you get late in the game and your deck is empty, it can be correct to save a backfire when you're under 10 cards in deck, because then you can backfire an empty deck and deal your opponent a crazy amount of damage out of nowhere. A lot of the times, you have the opportunity, like against a Quest Shaman, if they make a super wide board, if they Feral Spirits to complete the second phase of the quest, you can just Soul Rend for like 6 cards and just burn it all away and then win with damage from hand. Because you just end up backfiring away the rest of your deck, and you can play Pantharas, and again, when you're in fatigue, and the damage adds up pretty fast. Having the backfire will get you to the point where you can win in about 2 turns from that position. The turn that you play the backfire, and then the following turn you can draw, tap, draw, and all that damage gets sent face. So don't proactively use that last backfire if you're really, really close to the end of the deck. If you don't have to, you can use Soul Rend to clear out those last few cards, and then you set yourself up to be able to just kill them. Just kill him. I guess that's kind of it, isn't it? Oh, yeah. One last tip.
We had a tips and tricks section, but we kind of went through most or all of them. You have one last one?
I have a few last ones. All right, so first, Scavenger and Knoll do go to 0 with the discount, but a Netheron does not. Weird. Because a Netheron says this costs 1 if your hand is full, and Scavenger says this costs 1 if you have 10 or less cards in your deck. But Scavenger will go to 0, and a Neth will not. So be aware of that. If you go tap the first couple turns, then you have the opportunity of tapping or backfiring to finish the first leg of the quest. If you need to backfire and find something, go ahead and play the backfire. It's fine. It's okay if you overflow by 1 or 2. It's not a huge deal. And then, said this before, don't try and coin out a Netheron or Goldshire Knoll. It doesn't work. You will be sad. Yeah, I don't know. I expect that this deck will get some kind of nerf next week, if not multiple. Assuming the patch is next week or the week after, 21st. I don't know. We're guessing, but it's a fun playstyle that's very synergistic, and I imagine that most of it will stay intact. It just won't be Public Enemy #1 in the format anymore. And so I strongly recommend playing this if you liked old school Handlock or you missed Warlock in Standard. Very enjoyable deck to play, and a lot of nuance to it. It's hard to pilot at times. It's very difficult, but the swing turns feel incredible. I guess that's...
I'll probably end up queuing up this deck a little bit.
Yeah?
This week.
It's good stuff. I guess that's our show, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's thank our friends here. So, we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website, coincconcede.com. You can find our contact info, our show notes, our Patreon information. You can financially support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Thank you so much to everyone that does that. Join us every week live by following us here on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com or email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. Like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. If you like some CC swag, head over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Doshike, Proby1, Kresh, Cap, B-Squatch, David P, Snowpack, Lucky, Fade to Black, Waldo, Ponius, and Itinerant Wizard. And big Coin Concede to Proby1 for the 5 subs during the show. Proby1, you support us as always. Thank you so much. All right, Coin Concedes. I know that I'm ready, so I'll go first. I'm going to Coin Concede to Raren and Language Hacker and Trump SC, because the next edition of Hearthstone Jeopardy is planned for next Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern, and it's me against Language Hacker and Trump. Yeah. So, it's going to be even more exciting when I win again, because it's against even bigger names.
You're undefeated, right?
I'm 3-0 so far. So, we'll see what happens. I have faith in myself, but Language Hacker is very confident. We'll see. See what
Don't
happens.
sleep on Trump.
I won't, but also, we did kind of have a DM where he admitted that he was not really great at card names, and we were working out, like, talking about the card, describing it will be fine. He's like, yeah, I don't know the name of that 2/4 that buffs or reduces a cost of card in your hand, and I was like, you mean Two-Faced Investor? And he made a sweat face. So, we'll see.
Okay, maybe.
Having seen him
I have
in the, oh gosh, what did they call it? Streamer
Showdown.
Before, I expected him to be really good, and I don't know.
He knows a lot of things about Hearthstone, but also, as of late, we have to talk about Stormwind and not the stock market, so we'll see how he does. Yeah. Edelweiss, who are your Coin Concedes?
So my Coin Concedes are to Dragon Rider, who has been talking about maybe making a Mercenaries podcast, which would be cool. I would be excited to listen to that. Maybe guest on at some point. That could be pretty sweet. So we'll see how that goes. And then Coin Concede as well to Dexter, who threw me a raid earlier in the week, and that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Bacchus?
I'm going to second a Coin Concede to Proby1 because he wants to do a Slay the Spire coaching this month, and I am super excited to do that because I've been playing a bit of Slay the Spire in my off time when I'm not playing Hearthstone, and that game is a lot of fun. We've preached about that game a lot on this show, but if you haven't tried it, you should really give it a go because it's way chiller. It's a very chill game mode, or you could be very serious about it and take 10 minutes per decision and probably improve your success rate. But I like just kind of playing through and seeing what kind of crazy stuff you can do.
Yep. It's probably the non-Hearthstone game we've promoted the most on this show. It's either that or Hades. Yeah. 2 of my favorite non-Hearthstone games ever. Oh, and I have one more Coin Concede that I forgot about because I was crap talking Language Hacker and Trump. So I was on the State of Wild podcast, added another Infinity Stone to the gauntlet, and had a lot of fun talking with Raffle and Get Meowth and Corbett about Wild, which is kind of a complex thing right now. It is going to get some balance change in the near future, but there's a lot of discussion about what Wild should be and shouldn't be, and we didn't cover it during the show because Twitter drama doesn't deserve attention, but there was a lot of Twitter drama last week around Wild, and it was gross and terrible. And we dove into that a lot, and what should Wild expectation versus experience be. So, I enjoyed that a lot. And that's going to do it, I think. So, keep calm and rod into backfire, and if you see us on ladder, Coin Concede.
Coin Concede.
Coin Concede.